Hello, and welcome to And Still We Rise, Uniting Women for Change, a podcast series by Churches for Middle East Peace, or CMEP. I'm your co-host, Destiny Magnet, coming to you from Boston.
Alongside Tamar Haddad, sharing from Jerusalem. Each episode, we bring you the voices of American and Palestinian women as they share their stories and insights on peace building, spirituality, and current events, including the bombing of Gaza.
Get ready to explore the depths of the Palestinian struggle, learn about the forms and features of American solidarity, and draw inspiration from the unity and resilience of these incredible women.
Disclaimer: the views expressed are those of the individuals and do not necessarily represent CMEP.
All right, welcome everyone, and welcome to our 5th episode of Uniting Women for Change and Still We Rise podcast by Churches for Middle East Peace. We are so grateful to have two fantastic guests today who will introduce in just a moment. And I will note that this episode was recorded on January 25th, 2024. And with that, I'll hand it over to Tamar to introduce our first guest.
Her Excellency Ambassador Hind Khoury is our first guest, who is retired from that position, but she served as the Secretary General of Kairos, Palestine. An economist, she worked in development of the occupied Palestinian territories with a number of international bodies, including USAID, the Bethlehem 2000 Project, and UNESCO. She was Minister of Jerusalem Affairs for the Palestinian National Authority and the Palestinian Ambassador to France from 2006 to 2010. Ambassador Khoury also served as board member of Sabil Jerusalem and is currently on the board of Bethlehem Bible College. Other present-day roles are president of the Arab Research Institute in Jerusalem and president of the Bethlehem Rotary Club.
And our second guest today is Pastor Neely McQueen. Pastor McQueen is the co-lead pastor at Overlake Christian Church in Redmond, Washington. Her ministry over the years has included youth empowerment, restorative work, community engagement, and so much more that we'll get to dig into in a bit. Pastor Neely is also a mother of 3 and married to a fellow pastor. So welcome to both of you. We are so grateful to have you with us on today's podcast episode.
It's great to be here.
Lovely to be here with you all.
So my first question is going to be to both of you, because you are both women who are either in religious leadership roles or women who make a difference through working in religious organizations. What role do you play in making a difference in terms of the current situation in Gaza? How have you been incorporating current events into your ministries or organizations? Ambassador Khoury.
Thank you very much for this question, because I believe Christianity should play a big role. It's my faith, but faith in general. I'm as a Palestinian, this is a country of faith, really, whether it's Jewish, Muslim, or Christian. There is a lot of faith, and throughout my life at least, but always. It is very sad that there is this abuse of religion for political options have clouded this life of faith very much and created deformations in the practice of faith and in the understanding of faith, and this has affected the young generation. So we have to be careful when we're talking about the role of religious leadership and women. It's not only about Gaza, basically, because our story did not start on October the 7th or during this is the 5th war against Gaza, but the first one started in 2008, 2009. Because the real issue is Palestinian life, it's Palestinian rights, our rights to a life, to build a future. We have survived a horrible situation of realpolitik, serving imperial and colonial objectives, of world powers. And our rights have been so violated for over 75 years, actually from the beginning of the last century. And realpolitik remains a major problem here. Might is right. We live this every day, and more so as the years go by. And the last thing is what's going on in Gaza, to the extent of genocide, and we can't get a decision on ceasefire. This is humanly unbearable. I don't understand it. Many people don't. And for many years, excuse me if I say from Trump's time even, and the proposal for the deal of the century where Palestinian life and existence has been completely disregarded. I mean, let's face it, human life have become worthless. And if this doesn't mean anything to the global church, the presence of the church, the mission of the church. And I know that, like your organizations and many other churches have been active, and we're very thankful for that. And you are making a difference. But really, the impact on politics isn't there. And we have to recognize that. This has not only discredited political leadership, especially in the West, it has discredited the church. As a Palestinian, I feel this is the cradle of faith, the cradle of Christianity. And it hurts me so much that as the church has been discredited, our faith has been discredited. It's very sad. I heard it once in Christ at the Checkpoint Conference. One Christian youth stood up, a very young man, and said, in the US, I feel embarrassed to be a Christian. I couldn't believe that. That was maybe one of the worst painful moments in my life. So we have to be aware of that, I think, as a background information when we speak about political leadership. Anyhow, what I do personally, generally, I speak up, as Kairos, I do a lot of advocacy within Sabil, as part of Sabil and the Bible College. I try to speak up to media in conferences and such meetings. I do a bit less now, and I will tell you later why. I believe it's very important to contribute to the Palestinian internal dialogue because, facing so much real politique and that we are not real influencers. We haven't been real influencers until 7th of October, I think, in deciding our destiny. And we also need a lot of rebuilding. Let's over Gaza. I don't even know how we're going to rebuild Gaza. I mean, talking about women or even only Palestinians, this is going to require a very organized international affair. I mean, we have a decision by the UN Security Council on the necessity to start the humanitarian aid, and it doesn't get through. I mean, there's so much difficulty. I know I take care of a family in Gaza that I don't know, but we met by Facebook. And I know that there were, Israeli soldiers were shooting on people who were trying to go and get some flour or whatever, food aid from the neighboring street. What religious leaders can do, they're already doing a lot, I think, and women are doing a lot. In the churches in Gaza, that's where they house people. These people were bombed. Some of them, the churches have been bombed and people have died in the process. The few Palestinian Christian families suffer tremendously down there in Gaza. They can't regain their homes. Anyhow, I think there is a lot of work to be done in organizing women, in public diplomacy, in institution building. I believe very much in institution building on the process of the rebuilding process. We work a lot. I mean, we're very capable people. I mean, I feel as an older woman, I think I can retire, without too much worrying because our young people are so capable and doing a lot, both in the diaspora and in here. We need to be given the opportunity to build a life. And I hope whatever is decided should allow Palestinians to define their own future.
Yeah, and Neely, what has this looked like for you at Overlake?
Obviously a little different. I have to remind myself sometimes when I answer questions or think about the work we get to do in peacemaking is that I lead in a particular place with particular people. And so I feel actually this really deep responsibility as a leader here to engage the conversation in a different way, knowing my people and my place. And in my experience, which is so unfortunate, is I have found that there has been a lot of polarization around this conversation in the evangelical church in America. And I think there's a lot of theological and historical misunderstanding about what's happening in Palestine. And so we are spending a lot of time trying to nuance that for people and walk with people, knowing that a lot of times walls come up really quickly when you start to have this conversation. There's a lot of fear about how to navigate into this conversation because it does hit these really sensitive theological points and historical points. So we're walking with people, and it's patient work, slow work. I wish it was faster, but you're walking with people, and you're trying to turn up the heat for them to do two things, which one is to unlearn something they've learned, and then relearn something. And so you're trying to pay attention to like, oh, this is how much they can handle. Now we got to pull it back. We got to push into it. We got to pull it back, so you're trying to always lead and move people. To me, it's been challenging because I want to move faster. As I've had the opportunity to go with CMAP to Palestine and see the work. I've got to meet with women who are part of As So We Rise. And so I want to move faster. I got to go to Bethlehem Bible College and, we want to move faster. And once we start to push too fast, I have found the people in our particular setting in the evangelical church, they slow down, they pull back. And so we're trying to keep having this conversation. The current events have allowed us to kind of push into values that we have, like set values we have, which we believe we're peacemakers. We believe that we're called to be peacemakers. We can separate ourselves from the history and the theology around this place and just agree. We all agree we're peacemakers. That's the call. And so how do we as Christians advocate and ask for peace in a place like Palestine? We really press into that every human matters. Every human is made in the image of God. One of the things we're like detangling for people or helping them unlearn and relearn is while Israel is people of God throughout Scripture, what we know throughout the entirety of Scripture is all of us are the people of God, that every human is made. And so then, how do we value every life? The Palestinian child, even the Palestinian person we don't understand that is far and distant from us, how do we value their life and see them as the Imago Dei? And if we see them as the Imago Dei, then our work of peacemaking is even more important and valued. And so we're kind of trying to, one, tackle this really big misunderstanding that people have around what's happening in the Middle East and just kind of ground it in some really basic stuff. We're peacemakers. Every human is made in the image of God. And if we can do those things side by side, I think that's my responsibility as a leader in this context that I'm in.
Absolutely. I think you capture the essence of what And So We Rise and this podcast is about so beautifully, and through encounter between American Christian women, Palestinian women, and this understanding. This week is also the Week of Christian Unity, led by the World Council of Churches. So this is something we've been thinking a lot about. And the message I've heard repeated in our reflections this week is we as Christians are unified in the word and vision of Christ. And we as all people are unified under one God. And that is a God of peace and a God of justice and of mercy. And the way that you articulated that, Neely, was so, so beautiful. And building off of that, one of the things that really inspires me about Overlake is the way that you're committed to multi-level peace building. So you're looking at your local community to the US, all the way to international contexts like Palestine, Israel. And so I wonder if you could, building off of your previous answer, which was fantastic, share a little bit about how you make connections between the local community and this global call for peacemaking.
Yeah. I think what's been interesting for us is we've been partners with CMAP for, I want to say 10 years now. So a long time. So I think every time a group of our congregants get to go and see and experience and learn from fellow Palestinian believers about the conflict, when they come home, what they find is that there's actually conflict here as well. Maybe not as prominent and maybe not as with consequences as great as what we're seeing in Palestine and Israel, but there is definitely conflict, and the same tools we need for peacemaking in Israel and Palestine we need here, racially, politically. There is actually, I would say, we're more divided as a country and a community than we've ever been. When the pandemic began to happen, our world and the politics and the 2020 election, our world here became the most hostile I've ever seen it, with lives coming to an end, protests. There was a requirement for us to step into peacemaking. So we came together as a team and we said, we've got to have some values that help us navigate through this because we believe we're called to be peacemakers. So we began to talk about, what's the brave work we've got to do? Brave work here, the brave work in our family, brave work in our church, the brave work in our community. And then it ultimately means what's the brave work we have to do around the world. And then we started talking about equity, like what is the equitable work? This this isn't work that we do for people, we do with people, that matters. We recognize that we all had stuff to learn that we didn't know. We're not very good at listening to each other, is what we've come to understand. And so, how do we do a better job listening to one another? We realize like peacemaking has to be personal. I have to own it personally before I can engage with it globally. And then we talked about, what does it mean again to care for each other and nurture each other? And then how do we use our gifts, the gifts we have as a community, to do this peacemaking work? And so with all those kind of words and values, we were like, we're going to do it here in our community, in our church. We're going to press into it. We're going to do it in our community, and then we're going to do it globally. And so it's kind of been this commitment too, that like we can't do something around the world that we're not doing in our own community. It's pretty hypocritical to work towards something somewhere else and not do it in our own homes. And I really do think CMEP has been part of us engaging that, because we saw something and we could actually see it here, not on the same scale, but we could see it here, and it helped us realize we need to engage it here as well.
And change always starts with us, right?
Yeah. Yes. When I learn how to have it with someone who maybe is similar to me, I gain skills and strength to be able to do it with someone who's even more different than, like it builds on each other. It's actually probably a false sense of like confidence to think that I could jump into something when I haven't done it right here, So I think it helps us.
It also inspires. I mean, one of my most prominent experiences in life, I didn't learn from big, crazy organizations. I honestly learned it from my peers. I'm like, oh, you're doing that. Like I'm inspired to be like you. Your Excellency, given your extensive background in development and your various roles in both governmental and non-governmental organizations, how do you see the role of women in rebuilding and revitalizing Gaza after the recent bombing, and could be also in the West Bank? And what steps can be taken to ensure their active participation?
Yeah, I had a very extensive experience, and I think it's extremely rich and very, very helpful. And in that sort of approach where you view things from a very wide perspective, I want to just comment on what Neely said, because I really do understand. I appreciate the work that's being done. It's probably very complicated. It is sensitive, more than meets the eye, especially for an outsider like myself. It's good to be reminded of how complicated it is. But I still think the approach of giving the information, the statistics, remains extremely important, because they're very telling. So that kind of homework to collect the information, the statistics, is important, and the understanding of politics. It is all about politics. It's all about geopolitics. And actually, the last events have shown how important the US remains in deciding our lot. So to understand the politics, what is going on in the US about your Congress is compromised. I mean, the lobbies are extremely powerful. People are becoming much weaker. To understand also the geopolitics of, the Mediterranean, East Mediterranean, they found gas in the late 90s, and it has brought havoc ever since. I think that's why we never saw negotiations on a state which was supposed to be established in 1999. And we saw the destruction of Palestine, the division of Gaza from the West Bank, and we have the destruction of the region. It's very much for oil in the region, and not only the gas, but also the transport of gas, the pipelines through which countries and all that. So I just want to say that this is extremely important. Well, anyhow, first, I want to salute Palestinian women, and more so in Gaza. I want to remind you that women have been very active in the Palestinian context and established, charitable societies, and even a coalition, a union already way back in 1929. I think the first Congress was held in 1929 in Jerusalem at the time, and they had proposed a whole program of nonviolent resistance even then. So women have been very active. And today, when, we know from what is happening in Gaza, we look at television like everybody else, looking at the pictures and how women are holding families together, or whatever is left from their families, that they still burn wood to feed people, to cook something. I know they're using animal feed to make bread these days. I mean, the genocide that is happening includes the genocide of hunger through hunger. and how these women put up a fire, keep a tent, wash the clothing under these situations in the sea because there is no water. You know, to lose loved ones and to live among so much death, lost relatives. I really don't know what they could, but maybe it's a lesson to us how resilient human beings are. I mean, it's a real lesson that we're so strong and maybe stop behaving so spoiled, especially in the Western world. So, having saluted Palestinian women and spoke about how women were active, I want to say that the environment that is increased, prohibitive environment, oppressive, suppressive environment, doesn't help women to be terribly active, in spite of the role that we have established for ourselves within Palestinian political and social and economic life. I tell you, even in Jerusalem, there is a lot of suppression of activism and of speech. Even your Facebook and your messaging, your phone could be opened by any policeman or others on the street to see what you have been tweeting or what messaging, etc. I know many people are called into police. To even today, I know the head of the hospital I'm on the board of was called in. I mean, why should for investigation why should this be happening? So remember that this increasingly suppressive environment is not very helpful, and people become so scared just to keep a normal life. So we will depend more on what you women will do in the US, I think, and in the world. We are thrilled by the world, people movement in support of Palestine. I think something has happened that is extremely important. We need, hopefully, this will not only just stop if there is ceasefire. Now, I really hope we need ceasefire. Mind you, women, beyond helping family and community and just to be resilient, cannot do much in a situation of war. It's just the situation is much too violent. So we need ceasefire, most importantly. And we hope there is more organization. I know in the US, wonderful things has happened in terms of organization with Black Lives Matters and others. But I think we need to emphasize that to keep the fire going, because the threat is for all of us. I mean, listen, what is going on here now is threatening a regional war, if not a world war. And this is very serious. I don't know how much you're following that, the threats of confrontations in the Red Sea, from Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, with Iran. And I tell you, for the Israeli government for years, not only, and Netanyahu especially, they want war. And they have mobilized neoconservatives in the US, and even in Congress, there are voices that are calling for war. So it's a very, very dangerous situation where we have to be aware and talk. We need to prevent a regional war. Sometimes I'm really scared. Sometimes I know America has, because I know from books I read, like The Master of the Game about Henry Kissinger, that even that time from the 70s and much later, every government in Israel have been asking the US to launch war against Iran and its allies.
And so for the next question, I do want to go to youth. And for this one, I'll start with Neely, and then we'll hear from you as well, Ambassador, because I think you both will have great remarks on this. But something we've been thinking a lot about at Churches for Middle East Peace, both through And So We Rise, our women's empowerment program, and our broader programming, is how do we engage young people and young women, especially, in activism? So I'd like to hear from you in each of your work. How do you engage and encourage youth, and how do you help them avoid burnout in what can be really challenging and really devastating work in a lot of times and moments? So, Pastor Neely, we'll come to you first.
I think the youth are our greatest hope for the peace movement. I think they're hungry for it, and they're not so stuck in particular ways. I also think they're not cynical yet. Like, I think the older we get, the more we're like pretty cynical about peace even being possible. But young people really believe it is possible. And so they're willing to move towards what is possible. I think they're also really creative about how to work towards peace. They think outside of the box. The moment you engage them with the issue, they're ready to be advocates for it. They're ready to raise awareness, use whatever resources they have to engage it. We took a young adult group to Palestine And they came back and they were just ready to tell everyone about what they'd seen. Even now, as the conflict is going, they're some of the most active people in the conversation around the conflict happening now. And they're interested in learning. They don't have as much unlearning to do. So they're interested in learning how they can work towards peace and what's the right way to do it. So for me, youth are the greatest asset we have. What we say at Overlake a lot is like, let's let the youth lead us, because I think that they have more hope. They have more ideas of how to do it and how to go forward. So one, exposing students and young adults to the issues, giving them opportunity, platform, empowering them, instead of saying, well, that idea is probably not going to work. Just say, yeah, go for it. Let's see what happens. Let's try it. And I think setting them loose has been really powerful. And not only it's been interesting, and I think this is an interesting thing for me as a pastor, again, in an evangelical setting, is it's actually been a witness to our community, the young people, because they are seeing a church do something that they think the church should be doing, and is finally doing it because the young people are doing. So it's actually bearing witness to the way of Christ, the way the young people are leading us. So to me, it's essential that we engage young people. Also, they're going to keep it alive a lot longer than we are. So, and for avoiding burnout or disappointment, I mean, I do think peace work is disappointing work right now. I think it was the Reverend Dr. May-Elise Cannon who said, come work with us, join the losing team. It's can be a little discouraging. And so reminding people of faith that, the work doesn't solely rest on us. We have our part to do. We have something we have to do, but ultimately we trust in the one who is making peace in the world, who is bringing all things into new, and who's reconciling all things. So we hold that hope. But we have a few values that we really push in the work of peace. One is rest. Like, we have to rest. We have to find joy, moments of joy. And we can't do peace work alone. You got to be in community to do it. And I recognize that all those things are a gift. They're actually a privilege, right? Everybody doesn't get to have those things. And so what we're trying to do is say, like, when you have those things, take advantage of them, because they help you sustain the work longer. And so we recognize not everyone does, but when we do, we take advantage of them so that we can stay in the game as long as possible.
Yeah, something else that Reverend Dr. Cannon says to our team all the time, and I think you articulated really well, is that despair is a luxury of the privileged. And I'm sure it's come up on the podcast before, because it's one of the things she says to our partners here in the US, our team, all the time, and something that I've begun to live by, definitely. But yeah, Ambassador, to you, what are your thoughts on youth, young women burnout?
Burnout. I mean, we live a regular burnout now over years, young and old. I mean, I think we have a national depression, and we have no help for mental health, support, because we have to overcome whatever depression we get through. It's really difficult to deal with our youth, because I think there is an incredible level of frustration that actually goes on from one generation to the other. Of course, the younger are the most sensitive. Of course, it's what we do that is important. We need to speak to them, and I do. Sometimes I have the opportunity, but even for parents, we need to speak to them, to explain to them and share our experience as, people who lived longer and saw a lot of suffering, and we know more of the world. Maybe I feel privileged. I grew up at a time that were more stable, so my mind was, I looked around. I know what was happening in the world. Here we become a bit myopic. It's our situation that takes all our attention all the time. And for young people, I think this is a very difficult situation to live with. And that you mentioned the necessity of joy. I know that. I come from Bethlehem. I know how important that message of joy is, but we don't have joy. Young people don't have a life. I don't know when they have time to love, to take care of their health, to just enjoy a good time, to dance, and even to get married. And I know from our Christian community, many young people have a problem getting married, because we're so fragmented. The choices have become so limited, and many Christians are leaving this country by politics, by policy. So it's a very, very difficult and painful situation for young people. And I really worry even when peace comes, because under stress, people somehow keep themselves together. But if there is peace, I don't know how we're going to deal with all the mental health problems, psychological problems. But anyhow, again, I think people are resilient. Our young people are educated, they're aware, they're conscientious. They will find their way, but we need to help them. I think the most important thing to do, other than talk, analyze, share experience, explain the politics and the geopolitics, and speak of what happened in the Second World War and other disasters around the world, and how people rebuilt their lives. But it's for in the Palestinian context, it's very important to push for a clear road ahead. I mean, without any lip service, not talking of the road ahead like what is happening now from the US, is basically talking about a two-state solution, but not meaning a two-state solution. It's a political convenience because elections are coming up, and without real regard for the future of the Palestinians. I think we need to help now, other than ceasefire. We need to help define a clear road ahead, no lip service, no more roadmaps that are never implemented. So we're capable to define and work for our future. Let's hope now that we expect the church and church people and your young people, which are wonderful, both Christian, Jews, and Muslims. I really follow up the debates, and I'm so impressed. But let's focus on ceasefire now and a clear roadmap ahead. That will the only thing that will save us. Save the whole region, as a matter of fact, because we know now that the Palestinian issue is a central issue. And our people, if you're talking young people, 70% of the population is below 30 in Palestine and many of the Arab countries, especially, and more so in Gaza. So again, it's very, very important to work on political issues, address political deficiencies and weaknesses. Let's be serious. Let's concentrate on values. That's what Christian organizations should do. Let's go back to values and bring communities together and make all activism meaningful and impactful.
On that note, Your Excellency, what is giving you and Pastor Neely hope right now? And how can we continue to be hopeful in the midst of this suffering?
Actually, when you're in the middle of trouble, when you need to rebuild your life, when you're in so much destruction and so much suffering, you don't have a choice. We have to have hope. And actually, I think it's a natural reaction. I go to bed very often in tears, and I wake up in the morning saying, okay, what did I have to do? And to follow up what's going on so that I can be relevant. So we are very well made as human beings, and we need to believe more in ourselves. And I also want to say something very particular to Palestine, maybe. This is a country of faith, which means hope for us is not the word hope, just like some kind of optimism. In Arabic, we have two words for hope. We have amal and we have raja. Now, amal is being optimistic, but raja is having this certitude that justice will be made. People don't have a doubt. I mean, and the West have no clue, which has become secular, and they have no clue what this means. And probably what's happening in Gaza, the level, the quality of the resistance, the determination, maybe it should tell us something. And I think the word is raja. It's this hope that is the Christian hope. And it's also, I found out, it's also a Muslim hope. I'm sure it's probably also Jewish because it's the same tradition. All we have to do is do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. And I think we forget about this. But also what Martin Luther King Jr. said, the arc of the moral history is long, but it bends towards justice. I think it's very, very true. The situation, let's face it, this 7th of October, because it's a military operation at the base of the resistance against an oppressor, an occupier, etc., has been a big game changer. Alongside, it had changed, this Israel that is so strong and that everybody has to be scared of is not really, has been touched, has been weakened. The world is moving towards a multipolar world. The awakening of the world public opinion has been extremely encouraging, and you see demonstrations all over. I think Palestine has become like a title for the call for a humane world. We're sick of real politics. I think the whole world cannot take it anymore. And it's time for this to change, and people are speaking out. The technology has give us democratic means for people power to express ourselves. And I want to remind you of the Kairos document because, I'm not a theologian myself, but I'm very Kairos oriented. And the call at the end of the Kairos document that we need a more humane world. How do we create a more human world? I think is a very important call, and it makes the Kairos Palestine document so relevant and continues to be relevant. The pain that was expressed in that document in 2009 was already humongous, and it's much, much worse now. So the more reason it is for us to read that document and see how we should act.
Pastor Neely.
I love hearing the Arab words for hope. That was beautiful. And it's close to where I think I start as a person of faith. My greatest hope remains in God. And, I think I too, in different times of my life, in different seasons, have felt the despair that comes from hopelessness. But then when I remind myself and get rooted in the reality that I believe in a God who's working when I cannot see, who's moving in ways that I cannot understand, and I believe that's true. And I'm certain of that, that faith is certain of that my faith actually leads to hope, that, hope is a byproduct of my faith in God. But my hope doesn't stop there. I mean, that is definitely probably the grounding of it is my faith in God. But I think the women I met in Bethlehem, they give me hope. Sitting around the table, listening to their stories, listening to the work, listening to the ways they're showing up in their homes, the ways they're showing up in their community. They give me hope, even in places of great despair, that people are courageous and brave and doing work and using their voice and moving things. And I think that gives me hope and inspires me to do it. I think CMAP gives me hope that there are people who are willing to have conversations both in religious circles and political circles, bring those two together, even though, in my particular Western setting, those things are often purposely kept apart. CMAP continues to be faithful to do that work, and that gives me hope that people are stepping into those places. People who show up and wake up and do the work, even though they're in the midst of pain and suffering, give me hope to keep doing it. So I'm finding hope in God, and I'm finding hope in my fellow humans. They're inspiring and giving me hope.
Well, I think this conversation has been so important and so very hopeful as we're thinking about engaging youth, engaging politics, and multi-level peace building. So I'll close by saying that I think for me, this episode has been about thinking about how we not only abide, but embody the commandment from the Gospel of Luke to love God and to love our neighbor as ourselves. And with that, I will thank both Your Excellency Hind Khoury and Pastor Neely McQueen for joining us today. This has been such a wonderful conversation. We are so grateful to you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for listening to And Still We Rise, Uniting Women for Change. Together, Palestinian and American women can make a difference. I'm your co-host, Destiny Magnet, signing off from Boston.
And I'm Tamar Haddad, signing off from Jerusalem. For more information on Churches for Middle East Peace and our work, visit cmap.org. Here, you can find the latest news from the region, opportunities to get involved, and resources for contacting U.S. representatives about our core issues. See you next time.